The message, once thought to be a mere anomaly, had quickly become something else, something far more dangerous. It repeated across the galaxy with chilling precision, a warning reverberating through the communication channels of every known species. Earth remembers. The transmission was not coded in the usual diplomatic languages, but in an encrypted signal so advanced that only the most sophisticated civilizations could even attempt to decipher it. Those who tried found the encryption evolving faster than their best decrypting algorithms could keep up. On the bridge of the Elysium, one of the Galactic Accord's most advanced warships, Commander Velenfar of the Threx Dominion stared out into the abyss of space. His pale green skin, typical of his species, seemed almost unnaturally still in the face of the growing crisis. He tapped a series of commands on his console, bringing up the signal's exact coordinates. A dead zone now, an area of space once thought to be devoid of anything but cosmic dust. "Bring up the analysis report," Velenfar ordered. His voice was a calm baritone, yet there was a tension in his eyes. The crew moved quickly, pulling up holographic displays around him. The data was grim. The planets orbiting Sol had been obliterated, their remnants scattered like pebbles across an empty sea of black. The vast, once blazing sun had been reduced to a dim, hollow shell. But it wasn't just the destruction that caught the commander's attention. It was the lack of anything new. No energy signatures from nearby star systems, no ships, just an eerie silence. Who would have the power to do this? Velenfar muttered under his breath, though the answer seemed too terrible to contemplate. Humanity had been wiped out centuries ago, wiped from the galactic records with a single, catastrophic assault. But they had not disappeared from memory. The Accord had ensured that. The war they'd fought against humanity had been one of the most brutal in galactic history. Humans, it seemed, were both tenacious and unpredictable, factors that had ultimately led to their near extermination. Suddenly, the ship's comms crackled to life, and a familiar voice filled the room. It was Skiro, a high-ranking diplomat of the Harlan tribe. "Commander Velenfar, this is not the work of a single race or species. This is something ancient. We are receiving distress signals from multiple colonies. Something is out there, and it is hunting us." Velenfar's face hardened. "What exactly are we dealing with, Ciro?" "Unknown, but we are certain of one thing," Ciro replied, his voice tight with fear. "Whatever they are, it's no longer just a message. They are coming." The comms went silent as Velenfar stood up, pacing slowly in the cramped command center. He had to make a decision that could either save the Accord or seal its fate. "This isn't just a threat," Velenfar said, his voice now rising. "It's a statement. Whoever or whatever is behind this, they want us to know they're coming back. The universe isn't ready for what's about to happen." As he turned to face his crew, Velenfar's hand hovered above the command console. There was no going back now. The galaxy had long forgotten humanity, but it was about to be reminded in the most terrifying way possible. Cliffhanger. The Elysium sensors suddenly blared to life. An unidentified fleet, vast and ghostly, materialized just beyond the edge of the system. It was human in origin, but there was something deeply wrong about it. The ships were not alive, not in any conventional sense, and they were coming. The Elysium hung in the silent void, its sensors buzzing faintly as it scanned the dark remnants of Sol. The fleet of ghostly ships, silent, unmoving, hovered just beyond the boundary of the shattered system, their shapes indistinct and haunting. Commander Velenfar stood at the center of the bridge, the weight of the moment heavy on his shoulders. Every instinct screamed for caution, but the decision had already been made. They would venture deeper into the heart of the forgotten system. "We have to know what we're dealing with," Velenfar muttered, as much to himself as to his crew. "Prepare the shuttle. We're going to the source." The shuttle bay doors opened, revealing a sleek, stealth vessel designed for deep space exploration. Velenfar, accompanied by a small, elite team of diplomats and engineers, would be the first to venture onto Earth's dead moon, A moon that, according to the old records, had once been a hub of human activity. It had taken the Accord centuries to figure out what had happened to Earth's solar system. But the answer was clear now: a cosmic erasure, an extinction so thorough it left no trace. But somewhere on that barren moon, hidden beneath the surface, something had survived. Something human. Villeneuve wasn't sure what that meant, but the growing sense of unease in his gut told him it wasn't good. The shuttle broke through the lingering dust clouds, its hull scraping against the empty silence of space. As it neared the ancient moon, the outlines of a massive underground structure began to materialize, carved into the moon's desolate crust. The structure was impossibly advanced, its architecture alien in every sense, even to the highly sophisticated species of the Accord. "Engage landing sequence," Villeneuve ordered. His voice betrayed no emotion, though inside he was churning with questions. What had humanity been hiding down there? And why had they left this behind? The shuttle touched down with a low, almost imperceptible thud. The airlock opened, and the team stepped out into the dark cavern. Despite the harsh, artificial lighting, the cold, unyielding silence of the place was overwhelming. The structure seemed to go on forever, corridors stretching into infinity, some so narrow that only a single person could pass through at a time. And the deeper they ventured, the more the unease grew. "What is this place?" One of the engineers, a young Sylvian, whispered as they passed through a corridor adorned with strange carvings. Human symbols, but twisted, warped, like something out of a nightmare. His voice echoed, but the silence swallowed it whole. Villeneuve led the group deeper into the labyrinth, navigating through passages that seemed to close in on them with each step. Finally, they arrived at a massive chamber, its walls lined with monitors and machines that hummed with life. In the center of the room sat an enormous terminal, one that pulsed with an eerie glow. A single giant screen flickered to life as they approached, displaying cryptic symbols, none of which Villeneuve recognized. "I've never seen anything like this," the engineer murmured, trying to interface with the terminal. "It's not just human technology. It's something else. It's alive." Suddenly, the screen flashed a sequence of words, one message standing out clearly: "Project Earth's Wrath. Activate." The room shook. A low, grinding sound rumbled through the structure, and from deep within the walls, metallic noises echoed as if some vast machine was waking from a long slumber. "Cliffhanger." Without warning, a voice boomed from the shadows. It was cold and mechanical, yet it held an unmistakable human edge. Human, but twisted. "You should not have come. You will not leave." The ground trembled beneath their feet as a massive form began to emerge from the shadows. Villeneuve's hand instinctively went to his sidearm, but he knew, even before the shape fully took form, that it was no use. The massive form that emerged from the shadows loomed like a living nightmare, its towering silhouette flickering in and out of view as the chamber's lights stuttered erratically. Villeneuve's hand tightened around his weapon, though his mind screamed that it wouldn't matter. The being, a grotesque amalgamation of metal, flesh, and forgotten technology, took a step forward with a mechanical groan. It was humanoid, but no longer human in any meaningful sense. "You should not have come." The voice boomed again, this time louder, sharper. It reverberated through the walls, making the air around them vibrate with an unsettling hum. Villeneuve instinctively took a step back, but his crew stood frozen in place, staring at the thing that once might have been a man. It was a machine, but not simply a machine. This was something far darker. The air grew colder, and the engineer closest to the terminal let out a strangled gasp. The creature's chest parted, revealing a glowing core at its center, a pulsating heart of cold energy that seemed to flicker with memories, emotions, faint echoes of a time long gone. "Activate the protocol," the creature commanded, its voice now deep, almost mournful. For a moment, there was nothing but silence as the team members exchanged wary glances. The room seemed to grow tighter with each passing second, and Velenthar realized that every instinct he had was screaming at him to leave. But there was no leaving now. The creature would ensure that. They had awakened it, and now it was awake to carry out its grim purpose. This is no ordinary weapon, Velenthar thought. He had seen war machines before, ruthless and efficient, but this was something different. This was humanity's final creation, a weapon of vengeance, fueled by centuries of pain and betrayal. The creature moved again, its limbs bending in ways that no human body should have been able to. As it approached, Velenthar's eyes widened. It's not just a war machine. This thing was alive, and it carried with it the weight of humanity's wrath, embodied in every movement. The engineer, his voice shaking, whispered, "What? What is it?" "It was once human," Velenthar replied, the words tasting bitter on his tongue. "But that was long ago." The creature's head turned slightly toward him, its glowing eyes piercing through the darkness. "You don't understand," it said, its voice shifting, no longer mechanical but laced with something profoundly human. "You think we are the monsters. We are the victims. You, the Accord, you erased us." Velenthar's heart skipped a beat. He knew that humanity had been betrayed, had been wiped out in a single brutal strike after their rapid rise in the galactic community. But there was more to this story than he had realized, more to the hatred that simmered beneath the surface. Flashback to Earth, 2214. Humanity had just reached the stars, their ambition boundless, their potential limitless. They were invited into the Galactic Accord, a shining promise of peace among the stars. But they were too chaotic, too unpredictable for the established powers. The other species watched with growing fear as humans advanced faster than any species before them. In their paranoia, the Accord's leadership decided to eliminate humanity. They struck first, launching a surprise attack that decimated Earth. The few survivors were left to hide in the dark corners of the galaxy. Their rage festered, and with time, they created Project Earth's Wrath, a final retaliation, an unholy weapon designed not just to kill, but to reshape the universe in their image. "You erased us," the creature said, its voice now a hollow echo. "But we did not die. We evolved." Cliffhanger. As the realization hit Velenthar, this was not just a war machine, but a surviving fragment of humanity, twisted and reshaped by vengeance. A new breed of humanity was born. But before he could process the enormity of what had been unleashed, the creature raised its hand toward the sky, and a signal began to broadcast, spreading across the galaxy. The message was clear. "We are humanity's wrath, and we have returned." The creature's hand, raised to the dark sky of the forgotten moon, pulsed with energy. Its eerie, steady hum spread through the walls of the chamber, sending a ripple through Velenthar's crew. The signal it broadcasted wasn't just a message. It was a call, a command. Velenthar knew, instinctively, that whatever lay ahead would be more than just an isolated anomaly. Humanity's wrath, birthed in rage and vengeance, was about to become the galaxy's greatest nightmare. The creature's voice rang out again, deeper, more resonant. "You do not understand. We were betrayed, and now you will pay the price for it." Velenthar's chest tightened. The remnants of humanity had evolved beyond vengeance. They had become something far more dangerous, an embodiment of the rage that had consumed their world. He had hoped for answers, but what he'd uncovered in the depths of Earth's remains was far more terrifying than he could have imagined. Behind him, the ship's comm system crackled to life, cutting through the tense silence. "Commander," came the voice of Ciro, the diplomat from the Harlan tribe. "We've received reports from several outer colonies. Planets have gone dark. Entire systems are vanishing. The same signature we detected on Earth. It's spreading. The machines, they're hunting us." Velenthar's heart sank as he looked over at his crew. The creature's call was not just a rallying cry for vengeance. It was a signal to something greater. The galaxy had underestimated the power of humanity, and now they were reaping the consequences. "We need to act now," Velenthar said, his voice hard with resolve. "Prepare to leave the moon. We need to return to the Accord and warn them. We may be too late already." But as he turned to leave the chamber, a deep rumbling shook the ground beneath their feet, knocking them off balance. The walls around them cracked, and the ceiling trembled as though the very structure was waking up, alive in some terrible way. "Too late," the creature sneered. Its voice now filled the room with a menacing resonance. "You misunderstand. You are not the ones who will stop us. We have returned to reclaim what was taken. You are the ones who will be hunted. You will be erased, just as you erased us." Before Velenfar could respond, the ground beneath their feet shifted violently, and the chamber's lights flickered erratically. There was a blinding flash of light, and the creature's form seemed to blur as it disappeared into the shadows, vanishing from sight. The air was thick with a faint hum of unseen power, and Velenfar could feel the ship's systems flickering as the very fabric of reality seemed to bend. Then, from the depths of the broken moon, the distant sound of engines roared to life. "We're not alone," Velenfar muttered, dread creeping up his spine. The signal had awakened something far beyond what he had prepared for. The war machines, they were coming. And not just the ones from Earth. Something else, something older, more powerful, was answering the call. It was clear now. The galaxy was not just facing humanity's wrath. They were facing the return of a long-lost species that would rewrite the rules of existence itself. In that moment, the full weight of the nightmare that had been unleashed became painfully clear. Cliffhanger. The Elysium's sensors suddenly blared. A fleet of warships, massive and otherworldly, materialized out of thin air. The signatures weren't just human. They were something else entirely, like ghosts of the past, twisted and reshaped by time. As the massive fleet closed in, Velenfar's voice cracked through the tense silence. "Prepare for impact. They're here. And this time, they won't stop." The Elysium shuddered violently as the first salvo of energy blasts tore through the outer hull. The warships that had materialized from the void weren't like any Velenfar had encountered. They weren't just ships. They were massive organic constructs, their metal hulls fused with pulsating, biomechanical tissue. As the enemy fleet moved into position, it became clear they were not only human in origin, but also deeply altered by the same horrific transformation that had twisted humanity into Earth's wrath. "Shields up. All hands. Brace for impact." Velenfar shouted, his voice cutting through the panic spreading across the bridge. His crew scrambled to their stations, but Velenfar's eyes never left the screen. The fleet was massive, far larger than anything the Accord had ever assembled, and the power radiating from the ships suggested they were far from ordinary. "Commander," came a trembling voice from one of the sensor's officers. "These ships, they're not even responding to our hails. They're transmitting something else." Velenfar turned sharply, his heart pounding. "What are they transmitting?" The officer's voice dropped to a whisper. "It's a human signal. But it's not a message. It's a frequency. One we've never encountered. It's calling something." Velenfar's mind raced. Calling what? But before the officer could respond, the ship was rocked again, this time with a deafening sound that seemed to tear through the very fabric of space itself. A wave of energy washed over the Elysium, distorting the stars outside the viewport, making them ripple like oil on water. The Elysium's shields held for a moment longer, but Velenfar knew it wouldn't last. The fleet had already begun to surround them, cutting off any means of escape. He had expected a fight, but this was more than that. This was an ambush, a coordinated strike meant to crush them without mercy. "Deploy countermeasures," Velenfar barked. "Target the lid ship. Disable it now." The crew scrambled to respond, launching volleys of weapons at the closest enemy vessel. But their shots passed through the enemy ship's hull like it wasn't even there, phasing in and out, as though the ship itself were a living organism, bending reality around it. "No use, Commander. One of the weapons officers shouted, panic evident in his voice. Our weapons don't seem to affect them. It's like they're immune. Villenfar's gaze sharpened. This was no ordinary fleet. It was alive, breathing, evolving, adapting. They were up against something beyond their comprehension, something that had evolved in ways that should have been impossible. And then, as if in response to the ship's desperate struggle, a new, even more terrifying presence made itself known. The massive fleet began to pulse in unison, a synchronized movement that set the space around them vibrating. The signals they were transmitting started to take shape, forming into a complex pattern of sound and light, almost like a hypnotic song. Villenfar's eyes widened in horror as the shape of a vast, colossal figure began to manifest within the center of the fleet, a massive living construct, as tall as a mountain and shaped like a twisted, grotesque amalgamation of human and machine. Its form glowed with an ominous, otherworldly energy. "That's no ship," muttered Siro, the diplomat, his voice filled with dread. "That's them." The creature, human, machine, and something else entirely, let out a deafening roar, sending shockwaves through the Elysium. In a single moment, everything fell into chaos as the mighty behemoth reached out with tendrils of energy that snaked through space, warping it around them. "Activate all emergency protocols. Retreat," Villenfar ordered, his voice edged with panic he had never allowed himself to show before. But it was too late. The Elysium's engines sputtered and failed as the tendrils of energy began to wrap around the ship. Their defenses crumpled under the sheer power of the enemy. The creature's voice came next, cold and deep, echoing across the ship's systems. "The final judgment has arrived. You will not survive. You will be erased, just as you erased us." The light in the chamber dimmed as the Elysium systems failed, plunging them into darkness. Cliffhanger. As the last of the power flickered out, Villenfar saw it, an army of those living ships descending toward the planet below. The Elysium was nothing more than a pawn, and this was only the beginning. The galaxy was no longer a place of peace. It was about to be consumed by a wrath unlike any it had ever known. The Elysium was adrift, its systems flickering like a dying ember. In the eerie silence of the command deck, Villenfar could feel the weight of defeat pressing down on him. The colossal warships surrounding them were like living creatures, their biomechanical forms pulsating with an otherworldly energy that warped space itself. It was no longer just about the survival of the ship. It was about the survival of everything. The creature's voice still echoed in Villenfar's mind, cold and terrifying. "You will be erased, just as you erased us." He forced himself to focus, shoving the panic that threatened to consume him aside. The Elysium was on the verge of collapse, but there had to be a way out. There had to be a way to fight back. "Status report," he barked, his voice sharp, though his hands shook at the controls. "Power levels are at critical," came the strained voice of his chief engineer, a grizzled older Vornak. "Shields are down. We're floating in open space. No escape routes available. We're at their mercy, Commander." Villenfar cursed under his breath. It was as he feared. The fleet's arrival had not only decimated their defenses, but also rendered their most advanced systems useless. He'd seen war before, but nothing like this. These machines were alive in a way that defied everything he understood about technology, biology, and the very fabric of the galaxy. "How long until we're in range of the enemy's main fleet?" Villenfar asked, gripping the edge of his console. He had no illusions that they could hold out much longer. "Minutes," the weapons officer replied, her voice shaking. "Once they have us within range, there's nothing left to do. They'll board, wipe us out, and take the ship as their own." Villenfar's mind raced. There was only one thing left to try. The last desperate option. He had to warn the Accord. He had to make sure that what happened to the Elysium wasn't the end of the galaxy. "Prepare the last beacon," Villenfar ordered, his voice steady. "We will send a distress signal to the outer colonies. I want it to reach the Accord. At all costs." The crew worked feverishly, despite the odds stacked against them. The distress beacon was a relic, an old emergency device that wasn't as sophisticated as the Elysium's primary communication systems, but it would work. At least it was their best shot. Velenfar's fingers hovered over the console, his heart pounding in his chest. Suddenly, the floor beneath them rumbled again. The power systems groaned as if the Elysium itself was struggling to survive. And then the walls seemed to hum with a low, almost imperceptible vibration. "They're here," the sensor officer gasped. "We're being boarded." Velenfar's gaze snapped to the view screen. The massive, twisted warships had descended upon them, their forms now looming close enough that the Elysium seemed insignificant in comparison. The walls of the ship buckled as docking tendrils shot out, latching onto the hull, their organic appendages piercing deep into the ship's structure. Within moments, the docking pods opened, and a swarm of the creatures began to emerge, half human, half machine monstrosities, their eyes glowing with malevolent energy. "Activate the beacon," Velenfar commanded again, his voice a sharp contrast to the chaos that was rapidly unfolding. But just as the order was being carried out, the creature that had spoken earlier, the one that had once been human, appeared once again on the screen, its face twisted in a grotesque imitation of humanity. "You cannot escape us," it said, its voice now a dark hiss. "We are not just humanity's wrath. We are the future you never allowed us to have." Velenfar's breath caught in his throat. The full horror of their situation was dawning on him. The galaxy wasn't just facing a rebellion of the forgotten. They were facing a rebirth, a new era, one that would be ruled by a humanity twisted beyond recognition, guided by vengeance, and bound by a singular purpose: to remake the universe in their image. The Elysium shuddered violently as the docking tendrils began to pull the ship closer to the enemy fleet. Their final hope, the beacon, was now the only thread between survival and annihilation. Cliffhanger. As the enemy breached the Elysium's defenses, Velenfar watched in horror as the ship's systems blinked one last time. The beacon sent its signal, but as it flickered into life, a terrifying realization struck. The creatures weren't just invading. They were transforming the Elysium. The ship now under their control would be a part of their army, a weapon of unimaginable power. And the galaxy was their first target. The Elysium trembled violently as the alien invaders flooded the ship. The walls buckled and groaned under the pressure of the biomechanical tendrils that snaked their way deeper into the vessel, twisting it into something unrecognizable. Velenfar gripped the console with both hands, his mind racing as the horrific realization set in. They were losing. The Elysium was no longer their ship. It was becoming the enemy's. "Commander." Zero's voice broke through the chaos, a note of panic creeping into his tone. "The beacon. It's transmitting, but it's failing. The signal won't last more than a few minutes. The fleet. It's already starting to power up." Velenfar's heart sank. The distress signal had been their only hope, but even that had a limited lifespan. The moment it began to lose power, the enemy would know that they had failed, and the galaxy would be next. "We don't have much time," Velenfar said, his voice steady despite the storm of panic raging within him. "The enemy will soon control this ship completely, and once they do, the Accord won't have a chance." The crew had already begun making their final preparations, shutting down non-essential systems, preparing escape pods, and arming what little defensive capabilities remained. Velenfar's mind worked frantically, searching for a way to buy them more time, a way to disrupt the inevitable takeover of the ship. "Is there any way we can cut the connection to their ships? Some kind of fail-safe?" Velenfar asked, turning to the chief engineer. The engineer's face was drawn, exhaustion etched into every line of his features. "We've tried every route. The Elysium is becoming part of their network. Every system, every piece of the ship is now theirs. We can't shut it down. If we try, they'll retaliate, and they'll do it in ways we can't even imagine." Velenfar clenched his fists, He had always believed in the power of his crew, their ability to defy the odds and overcome impossible challenges. But this was something entirely different. There was no escaping this. The warships that had descended upon them were just the beginning. Those monstrous ships were capable of remaking entire worlds in their image. As the invaders continued their relentless assault, Villanthar knew there was one final course of action left. "Prepare to launch the remaining escape pods," he ordered, his voice a razor-sharp command. "Everyone is to evacuate immediately. If we can't stop them, we'll make sure the message gets out. Someone has to survive." "No," shouted Zero, his voice desperate. "We can't just abandon ship. The signal. It's not just a call for help. It's a beacon. If we leave now, they'll be able to track us, and they'll follow us. They'll track down every last colony, every last planet, until none of us are left." Villanfar's eyes hardened. He knew Zero was right, but there was no choice. The Elysium was already gone, taken over by the very forces they had hoped to defeat. Their only option was to buy the rest of the galaxy a little more time. "We'll make it to the escape pods," Villanthar said, his voice firm. "And we will send the message. We may be the last hope this galaxy has." He turned and began moving toward the nearest evacuation route, his mind already planning the next steps. His duty wasn't just to his crew. It was to all of those in the galaxy who had no idea what was coming for them. As Villanthar and his crew made their way through the shaking corridors, the ship's systems began to fail in earnest. Lights flickered on and off, alarms blared as power surged erratically, and the hull groaned beneath the assault of the alien invaders. "Get to the pods," Villanthar ordered again, pushing his crew forward. The panic was palpable now. The enemy ships had already begun to open fire on the Elysium's surface, blasting through bulkheads and systems, forcing the crew into even tighter quarters. The escape pods would be their only hope, but with every passing second, the chances of a successful evacuation grew slimmer. Cliffhanger. As they neared the escape pods, Villanthar heard the unmistakable sound of the enemy. More of them, pouring into the ship. One final wave of their forces, and the Elysium would be theirs. A voice crackled over the comms, distorted and alien. "You will not escape. The universe is ours. You will witness the reckoning." The doors to the escape pod bay slammed open. Villanfar's heart raced as he saw the shadow of the oncoming enemy force. And then, the world went dark. The escape pod bay doors slammed shut with a bone-rattling thud, just as Villanthar and his crew rushed inside. The blaring alarms continued to echo throughout the ship, and the sickening hum of the enemy warships reverberated through the very walls. The Elysium was dying, its once pristine corridors now littered with the wreckage of their final defense. The organic tendrils that had invaded the ship pulsed ominously, their bioluminescent glow casting a haunting light on the remaining crew. Villanfar's heart pounded in his chest as he glanced over his shoulder. The escape pods were their last hope, if they could launch before the enemy reached them. "All crew members, enter pods now," Villanthar barked, his voice sharp as they piled into the nearest escape vessels. He felt the cold grip of dread wrap around him as he observed the few remaining survivors scramble to secure themselves. Zero was one of the last to board, his face a mask of grim determination. The hatch to the pod closed with a metallic hiss, sealing them off from the wreckage of the Elysium. For a moment, Villanthar allowed himself to close his eyes. The escape pods were equipped with basic survival protocols, capable of reaching the nearest habitable planet. But that was a small mercy. They would be alone in a galaxy that would soon be consumed by the horrors they had unleashed. "Pod ready for launch," came the voice of the pod's eye, initiating launch sequence. The pod's engines ignited with a jolt, and the Elysium, their home, their ship, grew smaller in the viewport as they were flung into space. But as they drifted away, the haunting sight of the Elysium's demise filled the screens. The monstrous warships around it had already begun their grim work, lasers cutting through the hull, docking tendrils wrapping around every exposed surface. The ship was being consumed from within, transformed into a part of the enemy's vast army. "We've launched," Zero said, his voice heavy with the weight of their failure. "But what now, Commander? The enemy has already taken control of the Elysium. They'll be on us in minutes. We can't outrun them." Villenvar turned toward the viewport, his gaze fixed on the cold stars ahead. The enemy ships that had once loomed in the distance were now closing in on their position, their organic forms pulsating with dark energy. He knew Zero was right. They couldn't outrun them. But the signal they had sent was still out there, their final plea for help to the galaxy. Even if they were hunted down and destroyed, there was a chance the message would reach the outer colonies. "They won't stop," Villenvar said, his voice low and filled with a quiet resolve. "But neither will we. We're not just survivors anymore. We're the last warning, the last hope." Zero gave a sharp nod, understanding the weight of Villenvar's words. The Elysium may have fallen, but there was still a chance. The colonies, the Accord. Someone had to respond to the signal before it was too late. The AI interrupted their conversation, its voice devoid of emotion. "Incoming transmission. Unencrypted." A chill ran down Villenvar's spine as he turned toward the screen. The transmission flickered to life, and there on the screen was a figure, a familiar face that sent a wave of both relief and dread through him. It was General Hashik, one of the leaders of the Accord. His face was lined with worry, but his voice was steady. "Commander Villenvar, we've received your distress signal. You're not alone. But we have little time. The fleet that attacked you, they're not just human, they're something else entirely. The entire galaxy is in danger. We need to act. Now." Villenvar's breath caught in his throat as he listened, the realization settling in. The Earth's Wrath Project wasn't just a rebellion, it was an invasion. And it was only a matter of time before the entire galaxy would fall. "Tell the Accord," Villenvar said, his voice a mix of resolve and desperation. "We'll be ready. It's not over yet." With that, the transmission ended, and the screen went dark. The stars outside the pod's viewport were cold and distant, but now there was a glimmer of hope. Faint, fragile, but there. The final battle for the galaxy was coming, and Villenvar had just made the first move in an all-out war for survival. Epilogue. As the escape pod drifted toward an uncharted planet, Villenvar watched the stars with a heavy heart. The enemy was not just a rogue faction of humanity. They were the culmination of Earth's wrath, a force that would stop at nothing to remake the galaxy in their image. But as long as there was breath in his body, Villenvar vowed that they would fight back. For if humanity had learned one thing from the ashes of their old world, it was that survival was not guaranteed, but victory could still be achieved, no matter the odds. The war for the galaxy had just begun.